Tim's 2 for $4 breakfast sandwich deal is back, only at Tim Hortons. That means you can wake up to a great breakfast at a great price. Get 2 breakfast sandwiches on a freshly baked bagel, home-style biscuit, or English muffin with either sausage or bacon for just $4. It's a deal so good, I'm on my way to Tim Hortons right now. Literally. At participating U.S. restaurants, offer available on standard breakfast sandwiches for a limited time plus applicable taxes. Single sandwiches at regular price.
And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. Who are the sons of God? Genesis 6:2 refers to. Were they a race of men or something more? And if they are more than men, then what are the children born to these unions? Who or what are they? Coming up next, right here on The Right Stuff.
You are listening to the best, the only place to be on Tuesday night. That's right, you're listening to The Right Stuff, and you're at the right place at the right time. From England to Canada, from Detroit to the Poconos, we are showcasing Christian authors worldwide, giving you tips, tools, techniques, and resources for you, the writer, to hone and perfect your craft. Tune in every Tuesday at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time right here on WPJC 104.5. And your host, Parker J. Cole.
Hi, and welcome to this edition of The Right Stuff. I am so glad that you are able to join me today. It's a nice fall day here in Detroit. And again, I'm glad you are here. We're going to be talking about Chronicles of the Nephilim with my guest co-host and contributor today, Brian Godawa, and that's going to happen in just a few moments. What I wanted to do before that is give you a couple of pieces of information. This information is sponsored by Alana Wellington, and she's telling you about a webinar she has coming up next week. Are you tired of talking about publishing your book? Well, why not just publish it? Yes, you. If you don't know where to start, get tools and motivation by attending Finishing Touches for Your Novel, a free webinar that will go live Thursday, August 25th at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. You can register by going to www.monsoondaylight.com/free webinar. Again, www.monsoondaylight.com/free webinar. And I also want to let you know, on Saturday what was going on. PJC Media is growing. We will be having more shows come on board this year, starting in October and in November. So I'm really excited about that. Those of you who have been following me, you know that we just started this network in January of 2016. The Lord's blessed it that we had Dovetails come on board in April. Now we have 2 more shows coming on board October and November, respectively. So stay tuned for more great broadcasting options here on the PJC Media Network. And as always, thank you for your support of my books, Many Strange Women, The Other Man, Vengeful Vows, Dark Cherub, God Forsaken, and my fantasy book, The Druid Spear. Just thank you so much for your support of all my writing. Those of you who've been following me, you know what it's been like. You know the struggles I've gone through and how many times I thought I couldn't do it. That's why this show is always for you. I really thank you so much for your support and for your prayers and just for your continued blessings onto this show. So thank you so much. If you want to call in and weigh in on a topic, you certainly can by calling in at 646-668-8485 and then press 1 to be live on air. Or you can hit me on Twitter, Parker J. Cole, #RightStuff with your questions and comments. We're going to go ahead and take a quick short break. We'll be right back after these messages.
Don't go anywhere. More with Parker and her guests on the Right Stuff Radio Show. We'll be right back.
God gives humans the gift of making amazing stories to glorify Him. At SpeculativeFaith.com, our ministry is to help fans explore fantasy, science fiction, supernatural stories, and beyond from an intentional and biblical Christian perspective. We share daily articles and have extensive archives tackling hot topics like end times beliefs, the art of writing, creative excellence in the Christian subcultures, discernment, sex, magic, Harry Potter, and space aliens and the Bible. If you are a parent or anyone else with a discriminating palate, our reviewers explore fantastical novels, movies, television, and games in light of God's beauty, goodness, and truth. Want to find Christian stories? The Spec Faith Library lists every fantastical novel we can find from a Christian author. It's all part of our mission to discern, engage, and enjoy fantastical human creativity in honor of our Creator, Jesus Christ. SpeculativeFaith.com, exploring fantastical stories for God's glory.
Question: if you write a book, everybody will rush out to buy it. Obvious answer: no. If you were a celebrity or if you had a huge marketing budget, then maybe you can get a lot of exposure for your book. Another solution would be to check out joeytweets.com. joeytweets.com is a promotion and marketing service with access to over 1/3 of a million followers on Twitter. joeytweets.com has 3 packages available to fit any budget. That's joeytweets.com. joeytweets.com. Get some serious exposure for your books.
We're back, and you're hanging out with the queen of Tuesday night, Parker J. and her guests, right here on The Right Stuff.
Hi, and welcome to the show. You are listening to The Right Stuff here on WPJC 104.5. Like I told you before the break, we're going to have an awesome time talking to my guest co-host and contributor, Brian Godawa. He is the author of the Chronicles of Nephilim. That is a series of books that is going to just blow your mind. There's 8 books in this series, and he has some other works as well. We'll be talking about that too. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce my guest co-host and contributor today, Brian Godawa. Brian, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Parker. Ready to rock and roll.
I know. I'm so excited because I was just so excited. When I saw you on Josh's show, The Sharpening Report, I was blown away then. And then when I forgot how we connected, but Josh said, why don't you connect with Brian? I said, I sure will. And we connected. It's been just a wonderful opportunity just to talk with you and have you really unpack the veil behind some of these very murky areas in biblical history and in biblical times and all that kind of stuff. And then you use the biblical fiction and storytelling to help us and educate us as well. So I'm really excited about that. And so those of you who follow us on Saturday, we talked to Brian, I think last month, Brian, we talked to you last month. We talked about God Against the Gods. And so now we're here to talk about your fictional work, Chronicles of the Nephilim. And so without further ado, I want people to know who you are in your own words. So go ahead and tell us who you are.
Well, I'm a Hollywood screenwriter and a author, and I got started in Hollywood quite a few years back with my first feature film that got made was To End All Wars. That starred Kiefer Sutherland, and you can still get that on Amazon today. It's a great movie. It's a powerful story, true story about Allied prisoners of war under the Japanese in World War II. It's kind of gritty, like a Schindler's List, but it's got a very powerful redemptive message. Well, anyway, in the course of my Hollywood writing career, you have sometimes ups and down years, and during one of the down years, I kind of got the inspiration to. I always wanted to write novels, and I thought, well, now's my time to do it because not a lot is happening, and so I kind of turned my focus. This was about 6-7 years ago. But actually, what helped precipitate the change was that I wrote a screenplay. I did research and wrote a screenplay on a movie that I thought was truly unique. No one had ever done this before, and no one had ever. It was based on a Bible story, and no one had ever sort of done the research I'd done. So it was so unique. I thought Hollywood's going to want this because it's wild and fantastic and everything. And so I wrote the screenplay, and it was called Noah Primeval. It was about Noah and the Ark, and of course this was 6 years ago or so, and I soon found out that Darren Aronofsky was making his movie, Noah, right? And so I thought, I'm not going to get a chance to get mine out there, and I was kind of worried because I thought this is so cool. The stuff I discovered and uncovered was so unique. I thought, I got to beat him to the punch just in case he has the same material. And so I went ahead and wrote the novel, and it came out a couple of years before the movie Noah came out. But lo and behold, the movie was really not much at all like what I had uncovered because he had a different agenda,
No,
But what
he
happened
wasn't
was
like that.
Yeah. the thing that launched me onto this whole, novel writing thing was I had always, I love the Bible, but there's always some passages that are confusing or you don't understand. And sometimes you try to figure them out, and sometimes they're weird and you just move on. And to me, the weirdest passage in the Bible was Genesis 6, 1 through 4. Mm-hmm. And I had never really dealt with it. It was just definitely one of those things I thought, you know what, that sometimes we don't understand everything, and that's okay, and move along, And that passage, of course, you read some of it already, and it talked about how the sons of God in heaven, these are divine beings in God's heavenly council, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men on earth were attractive, and they came and took wives among them. And it says that this was happening in the days of Noah. And it says that the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men. That's a euphemism for having marital sexual relations with them. And they bore children to them, and these are the mighty men of old, the men of renown, and they're called the Nephilim. And it's just, what are these things, And if you do some study on it, you find that the word Nephilim is actually a transliteration of the Hebrew word rather than a translation. And sometimes they do that when the word is hard to understand or the implications are kind of scary. So Bible translators don't want to scare the readers, so they just transliterate it and make it sound like a weird word. Well, actually, the word Nephilim means giants. Mm-hmm. And, you start to realize, oh, my gosh, there's giants that are coming out of the fruit of these angels, mating with human women. And it all sounds so fantastic and wow. It kind of makes you scared of, like, maybe it's got some mythical stuff going on there, right? But what I discovered was I stumbled upon Michael Heiser's book, The Unseen Realm, which I highly recommend it to people. He's a strong evangelical scholar, very respectable, very scholarly, but he addresses this issue and he went more in depth to it. And that's when I uncovered, oh my gosh, this whole Nephilim and giants and these sons of God is not just an obscure passage that occurs maybe once or twice in the Bible, but there's actually a thread, a storyline thread that goes throughout the Bible that I call the War of the Seed. And what I mean by that is that these giants end up showing up in other places in the Bible, and we're familiar with them. We just tend to sort of not lump them together. For instance, we're all familiar with Goliath, right?
Yeah.
David conquers Goliath. Well, Goliath was one of the Rephaim, which is another word for the giants, that is related to the Nephilim. And then another passage way before David, when Joshua is conquering the Promised Land, in Numbers 32, I think it is. I think it's Numbers 23, 32. It talks about, Numbers 13. I got to get that right. Numbers 13, 32. It talks about how the spies were going into the Promised Land and with Joshua, right? And they came back and they said, they're giants in the land. And it says that they come from the Nephilim. And the Nephilim go back all the way to the book of Genesis, the other place where the Nephilim are talked about. And those were the Nephilim before the flood. Lo and behold, what we see going on here is that there's this sort of two different seed lines in the Bible, the seed of the serpent and the seed of Eve. This goes back to Genesis 3, when God curses the serpent, and he says, the seed of the woman will be at war with the seed of the serpent. And this passage also says the seed of the woman, which is ultimately Christ, will crush your seed, the seed of the serpent, will crush its head, and you shall bruise its heel. So theologians tell us that this is the first messianic prophecy in the Bible that ultimately prophesies that Christ will come and crush the head of the serpent. But there's also a notion of the seed, which is in reference to offspring, that their seed will be at war. And so this seed line war, the war of the seed, is what you see popping up with the giants at various places in the Bible, and God's people destroy or defeat those giants, whether it's in the land of Canaan or during the time of David. And so you can begin to see that, there's something more going on here than just these odd, obscure passages, but there's a theological, I like to call it a theological storyline that gives a more richness to the messianic promise of Christ versus Satan. And that's a real brief description of that big storyline. And what I said was, oh my gosh, I knew about these passages, but I didn't know all these connections. And there's a lot more connections than that, by the way. But so I said I wanted to retell all those stories where the giants show up in the Bible and retell them in a way that is faithful to the scriptural stories, but fills in the gaps with some fiction that is consistent with it. And what I decided to say, well, look, there's this spiritual war going on, right? Well, the Bible sometimes reveals a little snapshot here and there of the spiritual war, but we don't see a lot of what's going on. Sometimes we see it in the prophet visions but it doesn't show us a lot. So I said I wanted to show this spiritual warfare, and in order to do that, I sort of added a fantasy element where we're able to see what's going on in the spiritual realm in a way that we don't normally see. So that's the big picture of Chronicles of the Nephilim. And it started out with the book Noah Primeval. Like you said, it tells the story of Noah. That's the one that most people are familiar with, and so that's the way to get into the series. Then the second book is a prequel. I jumped to what happened and what led up to the flood, and that's the book Enoch Primordial. And now people have heard about Enoch. He's spoken of in the Bible in only like a couple verses. In the Old Testament, in the book of Genesis, it says that Enoch walked with God and he was not. Enoch walked with God and he pleased God and he was not, for God took him, meaning God translated him to heaven, much like Elijah, right? So what is so holy about this guy that he was so close to God that God took him, right? We don't really know, but there are some allusions in the New Testament, in the book of Jude and the book of Peter. But I found out that there's another ancient Jewish book that's not in the Bible, but it is respected by biblical writers, and that's the book of First Enoch. And First Enoch expands more on the storyline of the giants and the watchers. By the way, the sons of God, I found out, is another word for those sons of God are watchers. Sometimes people call them angels, but they're not technically angels. They are divine beings in heaven, but the angels, the Hebrew word for that is the malakim. But the word for the sons of God is actually B'nai Ha-Elohim. So there's sort of like a hierarchy of these divine creatures in heaven, and angels are actually lower than the sons of God. And the sons of God are called the watchers, and watchers are sometimes given authority over different nations. We can talk about that later. But basically, so it goes into more detail. So I drew a little bit from the Jewish, extra biblical sources and such, but I still keep it consistent with the Bible in order to sort of spell out that picture where it all began. And a lot of people, point back to the Garden of Eden as the original fall. Yes, indeed, that's true. But the Bible doesn't tell about that original fall. It just assumes it. The first fall that the Bible depicts in the Bible is at Genesis 6, and that's where these sons of God fall to earth as rebellious beings against God. And that's something that comes into play with the cause of the flood, which is something a lot of Christians aren't aware of. They think it's just man's sin that brought on the flood, but it's not just man's sin. In addition to that, it talks about the violence on the earth that was wrought by these sons of God and mankind. So there's a mixture of problems going on there that brings in the flood. So those are the first two books that sets up the stage. And then I bounce through history, or through the biblical history. The third book is Gilgamesh Immortal.
Okay, let me stop you real quickly.
Oh, yeah,
Let me stop you real quickly, because what's interesting about the Chronicles of the Nephilim is that you're taking well-loved passages, and for some of us, we've never heard some of these things before. For some of us, I've heard them before. I've kind of always believed it without knowing that I believed it until I hear someone articulate it, and it's like, oh, yeah, that makes sense to me, But some people say, first of all, Brian, you're out of your mind The sons of God in Genesis 6 is not about angels having unions with men. It's just about men. Okay? It's just about men who were just running around with women and their children became great upon the land. Now, there are some people who say that. That's why I was taught. It was the godly line of Seth. That's what I was taught when I was growing up. But then I kept saying, where did the giants come from? But last time I checked, if a guy's, 5'7", he doesn't produce, 12 feet, kids. So, so people are going to, when we get back from our break, Brian, I want you to talk about that, because some people are going to say, no, you're wrong. This stuff there are people who are just taking things out of context or taking things out of context and putting their own spin on it. That's what they're going to say. So I want you to respond to that, because I think it's a good question, because we don't want to put words in God's mouth. We don't want to do that.
Absolutely.
Or put something else in that. So I want you to respond to that. And for those of you who have questions, feel free to call in at 646-668-8485 and then press 1 to be live on air. Or hit me on Twitter, ParkerJCo, #Right Stuff, with your questions and comments. We're going to go ahead and take a quick short break. We'll be right back after these messages.
Don't go anywhere. More with Parker and her guests on the Right Stuff Radio Show. We'll be right back.
Have you read the latest issue of Sormag Digital, the award-winning literary magazine for multicultural readers and writers? Sormag Digital is available quarterly and showcases interviews with the best authors in multicultural literature. Sormag Digital features craft and business articles for those interested in writing. If you're looking for a good book, check out our book reviews on what's hot in multicultural literature. For writers looking for new readers to get in front of, Sormag Digital is the perfect place to introduce your book. We offer advertising spaces that fit your promotional budget. Get your free subscription on Sormag.com or order a print issue on magcloud.com. If you would like more information about Sormag Digital, check us out on Sormag.com or contact us at sormag@yahoo.com. Sormag Digital is the magazine for multicultural readers and writers.
Hi, is your book club in need of some fresh and exciting questions to ask club members and authors at your next book club meeting? Literations, the book conversation game, is 70 thought-provoking questions to really get into an in-depth discussion about the books you and your club members are reading. These questions really get into the characters, the storyline, and into the author's head. These questions may just give you and your book club members a whole new way to get into a new conversation, a literation. Literations is also a great set of tools for bloggers, interviewers, and authors to use a discussion question. Are you ready to get lit? Please visit our website at litversations.com, litversation.com. And please like our Facebook page at Simply Said Reading Accessories. Thank you.
We're back, and you're hanging out with the queen of Tuesday night, Parker J. and her guests, right here on The Right Stuff.
Hi, and welcome back to the show. You're listening to The Right Stuff here on WPJC 104.5. So glad you're able to join me today. We are talking to Brian Godawa. He is the author of the Chronicles of the Nephilim series, which is available on Amazon.com or wherever books are sold. If you want to go to his website, go to Godawa.com, Godawa.com. He is an author and a screenwriter, and he is telling us about his series, Chronicles of the Nephilim. Now, Brian, before the break, you gave us some rather fantastical elements that some of us may not be familiar with. And so I'm just going to read a text I got from someone. I won't say their name because they would hit me if they knew. But the text basically says, I don't like that some people go outside the Bible to other books to write their fiction. I believe your guest is taking things out of context. And so that's what the text sent to me said. And it kind of brings me to my question I asked you before the break, saying, well, are you going out of biblical context? Are you trying to put words in God's mouth? That's what I kind of asked you beforehand. So go ahead,
Sure.
Brian. Just go ahead and respond to that, because I know that they're not the only ones who may have that question, because so many of us have been taught different things about those passages of verses. So go ahead, tell us what you think.
Yeah, no, that's a very good question, and I totally agree. We should not go outside the biblical context, and we should, not take it out of context. which is why I came to the conclusion that the sons of God were these divine beings and the Nephilim were giants, because I got it all from within the biblical context. And that's why it's important, because the second side of that coin that we have to remember is we also must not impose our own desires upon the biblical text. If the Bible says something, even if we don't like it or even if it sounds wild, we should believe it, because we shouldn't submit it to our reason. We should submit our reason to the Bible. Thus, when God says he parts the Red Sea, that sounds so fantastic to me, but I submit my reason to the Bible, and I believe he said he parted the Red Sea, and, he rose the man from the dead, that kind of thing. So I come at it from, look, when I came upon this realization, I don't like it because it sounds mythological and it sounds fantastical. It doesn't sound normal. But I'm convinced the Bible says it, so I have to believe it and follow it. So, just in really brief terms, the sons of God is, when people interpret that as being sort of a metaphor or some kind of a creative phrase that doesn't mean what it says, it actually means something else. It means the righteous sons of Seth, right? And therefore the daughters of men therefore becomes some kind of metaphor for the daughters of unrighteous men. Well, in my books, by the way, I have appendices where I provide a lot of the research that I did behind the novels. But you can also find all my biblical and historical research. I compiled it all into a book called When Giants Were Upon the Earth. And I talk about the Sethite view there. And basically, you've got multiple problems with the Sethite view. One of them, in my mind, the biggest, really, there's lots of issues. One is the sons of God versus daughters of men. The contrast is not righteousness. The contrast is heaven versus earth, right? Sons of God, daughters of men. So the daughters of men is a generic term for all women, not a specific tribal line. There's nowhere in the Bible does it link a phrase or concept of the daughters of men to Seth, and nowhere, to Cain, and nowhere does the phrase sons of God ever refer to the sons of Seth, right? There's no linkage of that in the Bible. But when you do the in-depth study on the phrase sons of God, it's not just a generic phrase. I'm saying it's a technical term that occurs many times through the Bible. When you look those up, you'll find it in passages like Psalm 82, Psalm 89. And my favorite is Job 1 and 2, where it talks about the sons of God are in heaven, come to present themselves before the Lord. It defines them very clearly as heavenly beings. 1 Kings 22 defines these sons of God as heavenly beings. So when you actually go and find all the biblical passages where sons of God is used, it's always a technical term, B'nai Elohim, for those heavenly divine beings that are around God's divine counsel or his heavenly host. You hear the term heavenly host. He will come with 10,000 of his glorious holy ones. These are the divine beings around God's counsel, with whom he counsels and with whom he judges. And so, in other words, doing the study on the term rather than just looking at the term saying, sons of God, well, that can't be anything literal, so it must be something you have to do the study in the Bible, and you'll find that term always means heavenly beings. That's, to me, is one of the strongest examples of why we should understand that as heavenly divine beings. The other aspect is the Nephilim, which people like to try and say, well, the Nephilim is just another word for mighty warriors. Like, sometimes we call people giants because they're mighty warriors, not because they're literal giants, Okay. And the problem there is, again, when you do a study of the phrase Nephilim, or not phrase, but the word Nephilim, you find something very different than a generic phrase for mighty warriors. You literally find that it actually means giants. And of course, I already mentioned the one passage, Numbers 13:32. That's a key passage. But throughout the book of Deuteronomy and a little bit in the book of Ezekiel and in Joshua, you do a study, you find that the giants in the land of Canaan that we meet, there are many different names for their tribes. They're called the Emim, in some places. In other places, they're called the Rephaim. In Joshua, they're mostly referred to as the Anakim, and these are all different tribes of giants, but it says that they are a tall people, like the Anakim. They are tall as the oaks, right? And so it's very clearly saying these aren't just mighty warriors, these are tall people. That's the whole point. And then in Numbers 13, that is referencing this report of the land of Canaan, it goes out of its way to say, we saw the inhabitants of the land, we saw them, and all the people are of great height. It doesn't say they're great warriors, it says great height. And we saw the Nephilim, and it says the sons of Enoch, who come from the Nephilim, who we seemed like grasshoppers in their sight. And you have to understand what's going on here. He's saying that, look, these giants that we saw, they're called the sons of Enoch, or the Anakim, and they are connected. They go back to the Nephilim, and the only other place where that word Nephilim shows up is Genesis 6. So the Bible writer is deliberately saying these giants in the land of Canaan are connected to those giants before the flood, which is why they're saying they're an evil brand, and they're of great height. So, and there's much more to it than that. I mean, there's much more Bible passages, but that's just a couple ways to show you. Literally, the Bible is saying they are giants of great height. And so, you know, are you going to believe the Bible, or are you going to try to spin the Bible because you don't like the idea of there being giants and of there being divine beings that have sex with humans? Yes, that's all fantastical, but again, there's lots of fantastical things that we believe that the world laughs at us for believing. Axe heads floating in water, people raising from the dead, right? These things don't normally happen in normal scientific life. But if the Bible says that is, then we must submit our reason to it and seek to understand what's the theological messaging that's going on in here.
You know what's so interesting, Brian, and I hope that my caller listening in, I hope they answered your question, the one who texted me, I hope they answered your question. And it's a good thing because, you know, when you put certain things in a different context, it actually makes some of the other passages you may read all fall into place. I know for myself, when I read, if it's a book, it takes place in the same time period as yours, not your whole series, but a couple of your books. This book takes place from after the fall, before the flood, and deals with Noah. It's a series of 5 books. And he also utilized the example of watchers being watchers and having these, the children of these unions and stuff. So it actually helps put some things into context. And coming under that different context, for me at least, it makes sense. I don't know if I wholeheartedly fall for it or not, you know, because you know how you taught something and you got to hold on to it with both hands. So I totally understand that. But
let me tell you, it took me a long time before I accepted this, because I came to realize this is what it was saying. And like I told you, I don't like the implications. It sounds too fantastical for me personally. But it took me a while. After I just had to get to the point where I finally said, well, Brian, that's what it says, so you're either going to believe it or reject the Bible. And I believe in the Bible, so I submit to the Bible. And, you know, like I said, it's wild. I won't deny that. But God is a wild God. He does wild things, doesn't he?
Right. And then my caveat for everything is always that if I find out I'm wrong, it's okay. That's how I feel like
Amen.
It's totally okay.
Amen.
If I find out I'm wrong, I won't lose sleep over it. And so that's, for me, that's as always put things into perspective. Now let's take a quick, I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was just going to say, I wholeheartedly agree. And one of the reasons why I wrote these books as fiction and a little bit of fantastical supernatural fiction is because you don't have to believe it literally, because the theological message still comes through my novels, and the fiction itself is great storytelling, and it'll still make the same theological message even if you don't believe it literally.
Right, exactly. And we are talking to Brian Godawa. He is the author of the Chronicles of the Nephilim series, which is a series of 8 books: Noah Primeval, Enoch Primordial, Gilgamesh Immortal, Abraham Allegiant, Joshua Valiant, Caleb Vigiliant, David Ascendant, Jesus Triumphant. You can get all those available today on Amazon.com, or simply go to his website, godawa.com, and we're just having a fantastic discussion about these, because this type of stuff in Christian circles has grown, these type of topics. And we're going to take a wild shift here, because this whole series is all about wild shifts and things of that. So let's go back from an aspect of we have the Watchers, which is the sons of God, and now we're going to bring in a UFO thing. And some of our listeners can be saying, what in the world do UFOs have to do with this topic? I don't know how in the world you people are insane. Well, like you said earlier, if we can believe that the Lord Jesus can part the Red Sea, that we believe that he can rise from the dead, then some of these other things aren't as fantastic as they seem. And like you said, the world laughs at us for our beliefs. They said, do you really believe a virgin can have a child? These type of things. And so I do it as a caveat because now we're going to talk the UFO thing and genetic manipulation, how it all relates to the end times. And I could just tell some of our listeners are going, okay, Parker, I'm never listening to you again. And so, which is fine, because one thing about this show is that we're always open to our brothers and sisters in Christ all over. So I will let our listeners know that. Some of our more conservative listeners, just go ahead, listen to the conversation, and then do your own research, which is what I always encourage. So let's bring about this UFO connection, Brian, to this whole thing. Why will we even mention UFOs when it comes to Nephilim?
Well, Parker, here's where I'm kind of different from a lot of the main crowd of the people who are talking and writing about the Nephilim and stuff like that. Because you're right, there's a lot of talk connected with UFOs and the end times, and I'm not. This is maybe your listeners should take some encouragement from this. That I'm kind of not in that camp with believing in all the end time stuff and how it's all connected to UFOs and aliens and stuff. And because there's a diversity of opinions on these issues, but I will say this, is that I do believe that the notion of the unexplained, whether it's unidentified flying objects, or even throughout all of history, right? I think that aliens and UFOs are really a relatively recent phenomenon in the sense of because our culture became very scientific, it attempts to describe all supernatural events away. In other words, it doesn't believe in supernatural, so therefore it tries to recast things in a natural light to give it a natural explanation. This is a materialistic or a secular viewpoint, right? And so lo and behold, in today's world, actually, this notion of what we call ancient aliens, a very popular program on the History Channel of all places, right?
Go figure, right?
Yeah, this is a theory that is very, very popular amongst the modern secular people, and it basically says this. And by the way, this goes back 30 years. When I was a kid, I read *Chariots of the Gods* by Erich von Däniken. All right, and he was like one of the first guys who came up with this. This is like 40 years ago, I think. Anyway, the modern day says, look, they worship science, and they say, well, all these writings about supernatural encounters with beings, whether it's mythology or not, they say everything has to have a natural explanation. Therefore, maybe these people really did have some kind of encounters with something, and because man was ignorant and primitive, he didn't understand science. Maybe he reinterpreted them as gods. And so what if in reality we were visited by aliens from another planet and mankind in his primitiveness interpreted that as gods? So this is sort of like, I call this a scientific religion because of course there's no real evidence for it. It's just a paradigm that they use to spin and reinterpret things. And so they're looking back at our supernatural encounters with angels and they're reinterpreting as aliens. To which my antidote to that is my whole Chronicles of the Nephilim is saying, no, it's the opposite. What you think may be aliens visiting another planet is actually angelic, could be actually angelic manifestations of supernatural or divine beings. And so I think it comes down to that sort of clash of worldviews. Now, a lot of Christians believe that we're in the end times and that and they make the argument that the whole increase, I do agree that there seems to be an increase of if not manifestations, at least reportings of UFO encounters and all this kind of stuff. And while I don't believe that they're aliens from another planet, okay? If it's possible that there are aliens. It's possible that is life on other. Absolutely possible, but I don't believe there's any real evidence of it yet. But if there were aliens on another planet, it wouldn't affect my faith in God because God created them too, right? But now put that aside and say, but what people tend to say is all these sightings and stuff with aliens, they do tend to be religion substitutes, God substitutes, replacement of Christianity or real religion. So it's possible that there might be demonic manifestation behind these things because they're trying to deceive people to worship, other beings rather than God, right? And I think that that's totally possible. And then some Christians then link that into the end times. There's going to be a massive delusion and deception that people are going to follow UFOs as God, like a UFO is going to come to Earth and sort of say, we are the true gods and worship us, but they're really going to be demonic beings. I don't necessarily believe in that scenario, but that is definitely a popular one that's out there.
You know what's so interesting, Brian, is that my face is so hot right now because I'm so excited about the topic. And what it is that when we talk about these things, some people are listening and they may go, this is crazy. I said, but is it really? Is it really crazy? And one of the things that got me into halfway thinking a lot of this is plausible was when I started to get into apologetics. And I started to get into creation versus evolution. I started to get into the scientific realm because science naturally interests me. I'm naturally drawn to it. I grew up with Star Trek, and so that naturally interests me. And one of the things that I forgot who it was, I think it was a young Earth creationist, I cannot remember who it was, made the point that, why do you think earlier men were stupid, and they couldn't figure out how to make fire and all these other kind of things, and they made a mistake and made fire, and I got to think, if you look at the Bible, especially if you look at the Old Testament, especially in the genealogy record, these people are living for a very long time, and I really think if you're living to be old, almost 1,000 years old, chances are you're going to figure out how to warm up at night. What I mean? And chances are you're not going to want to eat your meat raw or your stuff like, well, they wouldn't eat meat, but you're going to want your vegetables a little toasted. I mean, I just can't believe in 1,000 years they could have figured it out. And it blew my mind when he mentioned that. And so I say all this for our listeners out there because these things seem fantastical. But what I always encourage you to do is do your own research. Look into this stuff yourself. If you think Brian's wrong, go ahead and prove him wrong. Look into your own research to see what you happen and what finds out. Because a lot of stuff is contrary to mainstream Christianity, a lot of these things here. But then when you start to sometimes connect the dots, you can see where some of it starts to make sense. And then, like I always say, my caveat, if I'm wrong, guess what? I'm fine with it. So we're going to take another quick break. Yes. Sure.
Go ahead. Let's take the break. That's fine.
Okay, I will take another quick break, and when we come back, more at Brian Godawa. You can get his series Chronicles of Nephilim online at Amazon.com or wherever books are sold. You can visit his website, Godawa.com, Godawa, and follow him on Twitter at Brian Godawa as well. We're going to go ahead and take a quick short break. We'll be right back after these messages.
Don't go anywhere. More with Parker and her guests on the Right Stuff Radio Show. We'll be right back.
Are you a reader looking for more compelling Christian fiction? Maybe something a little more edgy or a bit more real? Are you tired of most Christian fiction shying away from the truth and settling for a rose-tinted view of the world and its issues? Or are you an author who has a compelling story to tell, but you're afraid it doesn't jive with today's brand of Christian or secular fiction? Are you tired of Christian publishers telling you that your content is too edgy? Or maybe you've tried submitting your content under the radar to secular publishers only to be told your themes are a bit too religious. We invite you to take a look at the Crossover Alliance. We are an online publishing company that specializes in edgy Christian speculative fiction with Christian themes and real-world content. Our company is formed from authors and readers just like you who are breaking into the mainstream and Christian markets with this compelling genre. Head over to the www.thecrossoveralliance.com for all the details on who we are, what we do, and what we accept. Right now, if you sign up for our email newsletter, you'll receive a free digital copy of our first short story anthology. Check us out today and help us spread the word about the Crossover Alliance, where light shines brighter in the darkness.
Engaging the culture's imagination through speculative fiction, the Untold Podcast produces audio fiction from a Christian worldview. Find us over at untoldpodcast.com, where we partner with authors to tell science fiction, fantasy, supernatural, and horror stories. Find links at untoldpodcast.com to subscribe via iTunes, Stitcher, and a variety of other platforms. Each month we produce high-quality audio fiction that's free to download and free to listen. Our submissions are open, and we're always looking to add another great story to over 24 hours of narrative entertainment. Find all of our audio fiction over at www.untoldpodcast.com.
We're back, and you're hanging out with the queen of Tuesday night, Parker J. and her guests, right here on The Right Stuff.
Hi, and welcome back to the show. You're listening to The Right Stuff here on WPJC 104.5. So glad you are here joining me today for listening to Chronicles of Nephilim. This is by our wonderful guest co-host and contributor today, Brian Godawa. He's the author of these books. You can get them online at Amazon.com or wherever books are sold. Go to his website, Godawa.com. Visit him on Twitter at Brian Godawa, Godawa. You know, I like your name, Brian. Lots of vowels in there. So it's easy to pronounce. And so, Brian, once again, thanks for being with us on the show. I like spelling out your name for some reason. Godawa. You make this real simple. And just really glad that we're having this discussion. We did get a comment from Alana. Alana says, at Parker, on Twitter, she says, this discussion is fascinating, especially because I have a novel plan that touches on these issues, time traveling, etc. And Alana, thank you so much for sharing your comment with us. And I'm glad, too, because this show is always for writers. And writers sometimes, because of mainstream Christian pressures, they won't talk about this stuff. They won't say that there may be a different way of looking at it. They won't say, oh, you can't write about angels having sex with women. What is wrong with you? You know, this is a godly line of stuff. I'm not saying that this happens for everybody. I'm just saying some mainstream publishers won't do it. But at the same time, there are questions coming about what there's an increase in paranormal activity going on. There's an increase in, like you said, at least reported sightings of UFOs. There's an increase of weird stuff happening. And there are just some things you just can't explain away, no matter what you do. With people's experiences. I, for one, totally understand that. And so some of our writers out there may say, you know, I have an idea of what it used to be like in the Bible in biblical era. I want to write what I think happened there. And you can. That's the whole thing about this show is to write stuff, you know, write stuff, pick up the pen that God gave you and write it. And so even if you wanted to, say, write a whole series dedicated to proving Brian Godawa wrong, go right ahead. He's not going to be upset with you. The biggest thing is that we talk about these issues and open it up and try to get some dialogue going. That's the biggest thing about the show that I absolutely love is that I do have different points of view on many different things. And so, Brian, we've been talking about the series overall, some of the research behind it, but now I want to kind of delve into your books, you know, because your books are absolutely fascinating. First of all, the covers are absolutely outstanding. They're just so rich in detail, but they're not cluttered. And they have great iconics in the middle of the covers. They're just absolutely beautiful. So congrats to your cover designer who did your covers. You gotta give him a shout out. Did you do them or did you pay someone to give him a shout out?
That's
me. You did those? You are awesome.
Well, you know, I was a graphic designer for many years as my day job, so it was a profession for many years. So it helps. It helps when
you are bad to the bone. Then I wish I had something with bad music behind you, so I could just have it playing because those covers are absolutely phenomenal. I love how they look. I like how they reflect the elements of them. And so I want to get into your books here because with Noah and before I started kind of getting into all this stuff, I always perceived Noah as being righteous. But if we're going righteous as a moral righteousness, but if we're going with the idea that the Nephilim were intermarrying with the daughters of men, and they were having children. And then I remember Josh saying that if you look in the Hebrew, the actual word means righteous as in physical. And I'm saying it wrong, so please correct me. I'm saying it wrong. But like it wasn't righteous morally, but righteous because his bloodline had not intermixed with the Nephilim. Am I saying it right? Okay.
Yeah, kind of. You know, the Bible verse says that Noah was now I'm trying to find the passage here. Darn it, I'm not prepared. I should have been more prepared for you. But because it's a very crucial passage. It's a very fascinating thing, and I'm almost there, and I'll be able to tell you in a second. But it says in Genesis 6, when it's talking about Noah, after it talks about the sons of God and the Nephilim mating with the daughters of men, realize the context, right? Like you said, intermarrying. Then it says, these are the generations. Oh, and the Lord saw that man was wicked, violence on the earth, etc. It says, these are generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. And there's two things to think about there. People think righteous means good. No, in the Bible, remember, righteous really is more a man of faith than it is being a goody guy, a good obeyer of the law. But the important phrase is the second part, blameless in his generation. Here you are talking about intermarrying between heaven and earth, and that it's a pollution concept because what is the book of Genesis all about? It's about separation, separating land from water, male from female, right? And this is all connected to a concept of holiness, separation. And God separates heaven from earth so that these heavenly beings are violating that separation. They're intermixing. Then it says Noah is blameless in his generation. The word blameless is actually a word that is used in Leviticus. It's a liturgical word that is used of the blameless lamb that is sacrificed. So it is not blameless lamb, a lamb without blemish, right? So in other words, there's a genetic component here that's saying, look, in this world of all this intermixing that is a violation of God, what God is saying, that's why he destroys the world because of the corruption, he's saying Noah remained pure in that genetic sense. So there's even a reference to that even in that passage. Like you mentioned, there's a lot more to it than just what we see on the surface.
And that's totally important. That's why some of the stuff is plausible, and then because if it's plausible, then some of those other knotty passages actually become clear, and then you go, okay, then that makes sense, and it's nothing to be afraid of. It's nothing to be afraid of, because sometimes we can get to a knotty passage of scripture, and because we can't interpret it in the way we've been taught to interpret it, it freaks us out a little bit. But I'm not talking about some of the very vague stuff where, the Lord's going to have to sit down and help us with that one. I'm not talking about that. But some of these, when you put in a different context, some of the other things that were gray becomes a little more clear. And so we have Noah here, and then your next book, you dealt with Enoch. And then I wanted to get to the one book because it's almost as if when you go through the book, you're kind of jumping around a little bit. You went to Caleb and you went to Joshua. And I was particularly struck by these two books, particularly I was fine with Joshua. Okay, Joshua definitely has his own book, right? But I didn't understand why Caleb had one. So what did you see in the story about Caleb that you added his story to this collection?
Well, that's a good question because Caleb was kind of like Joshua's right-hand man. And, he like you're saying, in our memories, we don't have a high place for him, but I don't think that's right. That's good because if you read Joshua, Caleb's pretty crucial. And at the end of the book of Joshua, and going on into the book of Judges, it talks about how Caleb was actually a guy who conquered the three mightiest giant warriors in the land of Canaan. And that was Ahiman, Sheshai, and Talmai. And the Bible mentions this 3 times that Caleb, took out Ahiman, Sheshai, and Talmai. And whenever the Bible repeats itself like that, you know that it's something important. But unfortunately, it doesn't tell us anything about those giants. It just says that they're Anakim, and the Anakim are giants. So that was fascinating to me, because what I did in Joshua Valiant and Caleb Vigiliant was I came up with a fictional background to these 3 giants that the Bible talks about as being the mightiest giant warriors in the land of Canaan, and how Joshua and Caleb ended up fighting those guys and taking out their tribes, right? But so Caleb ends up being a guy who sort of does the mopping up procedure after Joshua.
what I like too with Caleb, I mean, and even the Bible, I always admired Caleb because he was like, we could go take these people. I mean, we could take them, you know. He wasn't worried about it, you know. And he's like, we could take them. Come on, y'all, we got this. And I remember, and the Lord rewarded him for that. He rewarded him his strength because Caleb was in his 80s, I believe. And he was like, I got this. We can go take these people, take them out. We'll be. And, you know, I just love that. It's kind of like the mafia almost. You know?
I know.
Like he's a bouncer almost. And I totally like that about Caleb's his demeanor, and he wasn't worried about it. And I like that you gave him a place, and hopefully with books they kind of live on even after we're gone. So I hope that, you know, readers that read your book later will be encouraged by that story. The other question I have was about when it comes to more of your books. You have Noah, you got Enoch. You talk about Enoch a little bit. Gilgamesh. This is Gilgamesh, and it's a half story for me because I've heard people use Gilgamesh as a way to disclaim things about the Bible, saying, well, the story of Gilgamesh is older than the Bible, something like that. Something like that. I may have it wrong. Go ahead and peel back the veil for that.
Well, technically, actually, Gilgamesh is older than the Bible in terms of the actual when the text was written. But that, just because something's older doesn't make it more truthful, right? So that's not a problem. But, you know, there's a couple reasons why I did Gilgamesh. Most people go, what? That's not in the Bible. And I took a risk with that book because I know about it's the oldest hero story that we have that in terms of actually the written documents that have been found, stone documents in Iraq, basically, Mesopotamia. And yet, when you read that story, it's still available. You can read it, and it reads like a modern-day movie. And it's always one of the most fascinating stories to me. I always wanted to retell it. Well, when I looked into it, I realized that a lot of what they were writing about integrated with my storyline. And one of the things of which is that Gilgamesh, the reason why people try to discredit Noah based on Gilgamesh is, and the story of Gilgamesh is this mighty warrior king of Mesopotamia, actually after the flood. And it says that, after the flood. So some people kind of link him to maybe Nimrod at the Tower of Babel and stuff, but not everyone. But so he goes on a journey to find eternal life. And he keeps failing, and then he hears that, hey, there's this man, Utnapishtim, who was the one who survived the flood, and he has eternal life. I'll go to him. And, of course, Utnapishtim is the analogy to Noah, and that scholars say that even the name Utnapishtim has the word Noah in it, so that this is their take on, their spin on Noah. But you could be pagan and be wrong, but still have some things right. And so I wanted to tell the story subversively. I wanted to say, use their story and make it point to the Bible and show where they're wrong in their story, but the Bible's right. See, so I retell that story of Gilgamesh and how he ends up going after trying to track down Noah after we've heard Noah's story, right? But then I also show how Gilgamesh actually ends up being one of the key characters in the Bible. I won't say which one he is, but let me explain myself, because scholars will explain that different characters in different books of different cultures may have different names, but that's just their culture's name for the same character in history.
Right.
So in other words, the Mesopotamians had a different name for Noah, and it was Utnapishtim. Right? But that was in their language and in their culture, that's what they named him. That doesn't mean that's what his name really was, right? So that's where you find these connections. And I believe that it's possible that Gilgamesh might be a very important character in the Bible, and you have to read the story to find out who that is.
And you know what, Brian? We are just out of time. It's getting close to 8 o'clock now. And, you know, it's been just a wonderful, wonderful discussion. We talk about the whole series, Chronicles of the Nephilim. I always say it wrong. The Chronicles of Nephilim, and we talked about Noah, Primeval, we talked about Enoch, Primordial, we talked about Gilgamesh, Immortal, and then we got into Joshua and Caleb. But there's also Abraham, Allegiant, David, Ascendant, and of course the one that's going to probably send goosebumps as you bring it all to a head is Jesus, Triumphant. And so I want our listeners to get this. Go ahead, go online, read Brian's book. If you agree with Brian's theories and his ideas, way to go. Buy his books, leave a review, tell everyone else about it. If you're a little skeptical of it, read his books anyway, leave a review, tell everyone else about it. Because here's the thing. If we don't research these things, how do you know if we're true or not? And one thing the Bible does say, is to love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, soul, and mind. We don't have a faith that doesn't have its reason. It's very much well grounded in reason. And so I'm really glad, Brian, that you took time out of your schedule to be with us today. I can't wait to dig into these books because this is my type of stuff. I actually love this type of stuff. I'm not really into biblical prophecy. In that I don't, read about it a lot, but I do love ancient biblical stories. I absolutely love them. It's always fascinating to see how different people feel about different things when it comes to pre-flood Earth, which I think is absolutely fascinating. And so really excited to be reading those books. And I just want to let people know where they can find you online and what some of your next projects are.
Well, Godawa.com, by the way, if you're curious and you want to know more before you buy it, my Godawa.com has tons of free information, cool artwork, videos, all kinds of free stuff that will help give you a better idea of what's going on there. But everything I sell exclusively through Amazon, so you can find my books. And by the way, they're in Kindle, paperback, and audiobook. So the audiobooks are really a fantastic way to get to read if you don't have time to read, but you can listen to them. It's all there, and hopefully they'll find it stimulating and challenging.
Now, Brian, this show is always about giving writers the encouragement to write, because I believe God gave writers, all of us, the gift to write. And for whatever reason, they're afraid to pick up the pen and write. And so I want you to encourage those writers out there today. So go ahead and encourage them.
Yes, you guys, listen, we live in an unprecedented time of opportunity for anyone who has the interest in writing, even as a hobby. In the past, chances are if you didn't devote yourself to writing and being the best writer in the world to get a publishing contract, it wasn't worth the effort because you put in a year to write a novel and it sits on the shelf and no one ever sees it. But in today's world, because of self-publishing on Amazon, you can even write short stories and sell them on Amazon and get people to read your stories, and you might get lucky and they go viral, and so now is the time to do it, because you have opportunity like never before, and there will be no wasted time. You can write a story out, and even if you can't get a publisher, you can still get it published on Amazon, and that's basically all my books are self-published, and I'm making a living doing self-publishing because I just did the work of writing them and putting them up on Amazon and trying to market them and get people to know. I don't have anybody doing anything but me. I have no publisher, no advertiser helping me. I do all the work. So it can be done. But you just have to get off your chair, or get back in your chair. get on your butt and start writing.
Exactly. And I can't think of a better way to end the show. And Brian, once again, thank you so much. Love to have you back real soon, because this stuff makes my brain just sizzle with ideas and concepts, and I love this stuff, and I'm so glad that you're challenging some of our more conservative brothers and sisters to say, hey, I was there, and I could see my thoughts changing on some things. You may be there too. Maybe there's a Bible passage that you can't understand unless you do some more research into this realm that you may not have done before. So go ahead, get a copy of Brian's book of the Chronicles of Nephilim. You can get that today. Get Noah Primeval. Get that and just check it out. I know you're going to enjoy them. Others have enjoyed them. And then go to his website, Godawa.com. You won't be disappointed. Brian, thank you so much for being with us on the show today. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
And for those of you who are just listening in, Brian made a point. He said, now is the time to do it. It's a great opportunity for you to be a writer. You can self-publish all your stuff. He even says he doesn't have a publisher. He's just doing it through Amazon.com, because now you can self-publish your stuff. And it really brings back to mind Alana's webinar that I mentioned to you earlier before the show. Basically, I'm just going to reiterate what he said, what he said, what Alana's saying. Are you tired of talking about publishing your book? Well, why not just publish it? If you don't know where to start, get tools and motivation by attending Alana's Finishing Touches for your novel. It's a free webinar. Who can beat that? A free webinar that will go live Thursday, August 25th at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Register by going to our website, monsoondaylight.com/free webinar. So you got Brian's books telling you about very different views take on Genesis, on Noah, and all those things that we hold so dear. You have Alana helping you to get your book published. What are you waiting for? Write stuff. Thank you so much for being with me on the show today. You have a wonderful, blessed day. And from the Queen of Tuesday Nights, God bless.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of The Right Stuff. Follow Parker online at parkerjcole.com. To hear this show and other shows, visit the show archive at therightstuffradio.wordpress.com. We'll be back same time next week, 7 p.m. Eastern Time.
The sweet sounds of summer, and there's no better way to enjoy them than with the refreshing taste of frozen drinks from Tim Hortons, like our new mixed berry smoothie, perfect for relaxing in the park, or the new tropical orange fruit chill, great for enjoying the ball game, or just spend a day at the beach with the new watermelon frozen lemonade. Well, time for another one. Chill out with any of our small frozen drinks for only $2. Try one at your neighborhood Tim's today. At participating U.S. restaurants, offer available for a limited time.
Tim's 2 for $4 breakfast sandwich deal is back, only at Tim Hortons. That means you can wake up to a great breakfast at a great price. Get 2 breakfast sandwiches on a freshly baked bagel, homestyle biscuit, or English muffin with either sausage or bacon for just $4. It's a deal so good, I'm on my way to Tim Hortons right now. Literally. At participating U.S. restaurants, offer available on standard breakfast sandwiches for a limited time plus applicable taxes. Single sandwiches at regular price.